The home of jump racing. This is where the magic happens. Feel like a Cheltenham favourite with Paddy Power.
Hello everyone, welcome to Road to Cheltenham, and I'm delighted to say I am rejoined by Ruby Walsh this week. Ruby, did you have a good break?
I had a lovely time, Lydia, but I hear I'm under a bit of pressure to up my game, apparently.
Yeah, Danny turned up. He got all the sartorial advice from you as well in a smart shirt and tie. Just the hair was different.
Yeah, I'd say it was.
Let's crack on with things, shall we? Because we've got a lot to get through. Quite often this can be a quiet enough week, not at all in any way, shape or form. And the obvious place to start, I think, is with Bob Olinger. He had missed a few engagements. Tantalisingly, he'd been entered a couple of times in Britain. He also missed a couple of engagements over the Christmas period in Ireland. Instead, Henry de Bromhead, his trainer, was focused upon Punchestown last Sunday for the Kildare Novice Chase Grade 3. What did you make of his second start over fences?
Yeah, look, I suppose it's become a bit of a different target with the creation of the Dublin Racing Festival, but this novice chase was always the Killiney run at the old early January Leopardstown meeting. So it's a novice chase that's been there for years. It's now the Kildare novice chase. Obviously, the Dublin Racing Festival took the Thai Cottage, which became the Grade 1 Dublin 2-mile chase, but it had to give away the Killiney novice chase. So that's why you had the Kildare chase in Punchestown and run a week later than it used to be run. But what did I make of Bob Olinger? I thought he jumped better. I think he is an absolute aeroplane of a racehorse, but I still think his jumping is fine. It's not spectacular. That's what I made of it.
Okay, well, let's go close up and talk about exactly what he did through the race, and then we can hear a little bit about what Henry de Bromhead thought. So he was up against CAPODANNO and GAILLARD de MESNIL from Willie Mullins' yard. Lifetime Ambition was in there as well. Give us your take on the race.
Yeah, it was obviously a competitive field. He lined up handy and a bit wide, and obviously off the bend to the first fence. He's a little bit keen on the outside with Rachel Blackmore. He spots her stride and he matches West Cork Wildway, who's inside him in the red and white colours. They take off and land together. Same at the second fence. Rachel spots a good stride and he pings it. And at the third fence, Rachel gives him a squeeze going to it, but he says no. He shortens himself and takes an extra side. So he's a bit safer, popped the fourth fence fine and rounds the bend to the fifth fence where Rachel rides it at him, and he quickens to join West Cork Wildway on the takeoff side, but he doesn't land past him. He only lands beside him. He was good at the sixth. At the seventh fence, you can see where Capodanno, how quick he is when Mark Walsh doesn't ask him. He changes his mind. Mark gives him a squeeze, he puts down, but he's very quick at it. Now they bypass 9, 10 and 11. And by the time they face around to what was the third last, fence number 12, he takes off right beside Capodanno. Now, Bob Olinger was long, Capodanno was tight. They take off together, but they still only land together. And it's more noticeable at the 13th, where they both meet on a long stride. But you watch Capodanno away from it. He gets a length and a quarter on Bob Olinger. So to me, Bob Olinger doesn't make anything in the air. Now, he shows his ability then off the home turn when he quickens up and shows that turn of foot and powers away from Capodanno. Rachel Blackmore had some shorten up going to the last, and he did what he didn't do at Gorn. He makes an effort. He shortens up and jumps it, whereas at Gorn, it was just, get off the ground and land. So he has learned from there. But he at best holds parity in the air, but he never makes ground.
Yeah, now, there's nobody is arguing about the quality of Bob Olinger's engine. I mean, no. Clearly he's got a huge engine. We know that from the Ballymore. I suppose the quibble is that, unlike other horses, he hasn't improved a huge amount for switching to fences, has he?
He doesn't look to have, whereas Capodanno does. And it's that second last fence where you can see it, obviously, where Capodanno has improved. He lands running, gets away, whereas with Bob Olinger, it's a bit safer. Now, as you said, no one is arguing with his engine and his pure ability, but it does make him slightly vulnerable to horses that weren't that far behind him who do make ground in the air. And you'd wonder, does he need to go a bit further? I had argued in the beginning, if he was going shorter, would really attack him. Would that get him through the air? But no, he knows how to move his feet. He knows how to get in close. He's been taught to jump, and they've done a really good job teaching him, but he's not really electric.
That's really interesting. So with more evidence, as is sensible, you've changed your mind. You think dropping down in trip is not the way to go, but maybe going up in trip. And he's been entered, of course, in the Turners and the Brown Advisory, so 2.5 and 3 at the Cheltenham Festival. I found the post-race interview between Kevin O'Ryan and Henry de Bromhead completely fascinating. Let's have a look at it now.
Quite a little bit of unfair criticism about how he jumped first time out over fence. I thought on the whole he jumped well that day in Gorn.
Yeah, he jumped fine. Dara did a great job on him. You know, it was first run over fences. You could argue he didn't take to it like a duck to water, but we've done a lot of schooling, a lot more than we normally would with him, and he's really taken to it well. Rachel's done a fantastic job with him at home, and the other day we schooled him and we just both went, yeah, that's it. You know, if we can repeat that on the track, happy days. So it's good to see it.
And you obviously felt that he needed a lot more schooling, because you said just there you touched on it, you've done a lot more schooling with him than you would normally do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I mean, he wasn't brilliant in, you know, he was fine. I thought he was fine in Goran, but it was nice to see him step forward from that.
He's very clever at his obstacles as well. When he was wrong at one or two, he's gone in and he's popped them.
Yeah, I think I'd say if he had to go either way, that's his preference. You know, he'll just pop away. Yeah.
What I found so interesting about that, Ruby, was that Kevin O'Ryan is impressed with Bob Olinger, and he's inviting Henry to agree that everything in the garden is rosy. But Henry is talking about the intensive schooling he had to put in, talking about how the horse had more than they might usually give, and talking about the fact that if the horse has a choice approaching a fence, he's going to want to pop it rather than actually stand off.
That was obvious at the third fence, Lydia. Now, Rachel doesn't fully commit him. She gives him the office to stand out, or if he wants to get in, and he takes that option. He gets in. At the last stride, she gives him a little squeeze, but he doesn't. He shortens and pops it. But now he knows what he's doing when he does that, which is brilliant, which means he's most likely not going to end up on the floor. But it's still, he concedes a length to West Cork Wildway. Now, CAPODANNO was a good bit below Bob Olinger over hurdles. Now, obviously, you can argue Gaillarд, the MESNIL hasn't improved for going chasing either, and he hasn't. But that's life. There's loads of horses that don't, but some horses do. And he's going to meet horses that have improved and are probably a little bit better than CAPODANNO as he goes on from here. That's
the point. I think that is the absolute point. And I'm glad you brought up Gaillard Domenial. I mean, if anything, he's the one he's worse.
Disimproved. Yeah, he has disimproved. That said, this, you know, without CAPODANNO's mistake at Naas, is the result pretty much the same for the two of them? And CAPODANNO beat Gaillard Domenial 4.5 or 5 lengths in Naas after making a bad mistake. And he's, you know, put a lot more ground between himself, the run under his belt. But the other side of the coin is CAPODANNO's best performance last year was at 3 miles.
Yeah.
So, you know, back down to 2.5, and there's so many fences missing last week.
Well, that is a key point, isn't it? First of all, let's just reflect. Let's straight compare looking at Bob Olinger at Gorin and Punchestown in the closing stages, and just give your view about what has actually improved, so that we're completely fair.
The last fence is the key. You know, when he goes to the last in Punchestown, and he's quickened up now considerably in Punchestown to get the better of CAPODANNO, so he is going quicker, and Rachel just sits on him, keeps a hold of his head, and he shortens up and he jumps it. Whereas at Goran Park, when Darragh O'Keefe sat up on him and he got in deep, it was, oh, hold your breath for a second, what's going to happen? But you never had any doubt about him at Punchestown. He shortened up, he was looking, he was watching. And I know you can often say it, but they obviously have done a hell of a good job with this horse's schooling, because he has learned to watch what he's at, move his feet, make some bit of a shape. So again, credit where credit is due. But I'd prefer to see him first time round at that fence when Rachel gave him the office. I'd love to have seen him go out through the air.
Yeah, he doesn't quite seem to have the confidence to do that, the appetite to do that just yet. And it was interesting that clearly going into Punchestown, I think Henry de Bromhead had in his mind that they were probably going to need to give him some more experience, go racing again. And as a result of Punchestown, because he was more pleased with the way he jumps, he's now thinking, well, maybe I'm not going to go to the Dublin Racing Festival. Maybe the ground isn't suitable. Maybe I'll go straight to Cheltenham. But the problem with Punchestown is how few fences there were to jump.
Well, it's how many we're missing. Obviously, with the low-lying sun, you had fences 9, 10 and 11, which were the 3 in the back straight that were missing. But also by being at the winter time in Punchestown, there's only one fence in the home straight because they race down the same strip of ground for hurdles and fences. They remove the hurdles and roll in the fence. Now they haven't got time to roll in two, so they only roll in one. But were that at Easter or earlier in the autumn, you would have two fences in the home straight. So in theory, they would have jumped 5 more fences on the spring autumn tracks at Punchestown than they jumped last Sunday.
So this is quite a nuanced argument, and nuanced arguments don't really fare well in the modern world, do they? In that, you know, if we have a look at the betting for the Turner's Novice Chase, Bob Olinger is even money with Paddy Power. He's odds on elsewhere. L'Homme-Pressé, who we're about to talk to, is 7-1. Galopin Des Champs, who's interesting, we'll come back to him, he's 8-1, and Jungle Boogie is 12-1. And our point is, I think, that at even money, we're talking about a horse who is going to encounter horses of comparable ability potentially in that race, who have taken to fences better than him. And is that price disparity just a little bit too big? For me, it is.
It is, because, and it's very hard to weigh up what we're talking about. So at best, I see Bob Olinger holding parity in the air with Galopin Des Champs or L'Homme-Pressé. But that's not going to happen at every fence. So even if we make it 50-50, I think he's going to lose the best part of a half a length at half the fences. So that's 4 lengths, probably 5 lengths. So you then add in the extra energy Bob Olinger will have to use up to make up those half lengths, which you can't quantify. And you start thinking, well, how far ahead of these two horses is Bob Olinger? And is that far enough to justify the price? And I'm not sure it is.
No, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because if he doesn't go to the Dublin Racing Festival and Galopin Des Champs does, and you would think that he probably would, could Galopin Des Champs race his way into the Turners rather than the Brown Advisory? And could Bob Olinger end up going up in trip to the Brown Advisory, where that tendency to pop might not be such an issue?
It could. And people say, what are you talking about? There's more jumping in a 3-mile race. There is, but you're going, what, half a mile an hour, maybe a mile an hour slower. And there's not the same advantage. You can get a couple of good jumps in a 3-mile chase, but if you keep getting jumps at every fence, you too will run out of energy. So you can't use your jumping in the same way. Whereas you come back down in distance a little bit, even back down to the interim trip, you can use your jumping more. And that looked to be Galopin Des Champs' strong point at Leopardstown. And it's what makes really good 2-mile chasers stand out, is that flamboyant jumping, like not arching their back, rising in front, but never just doing it really quickly and getting ground. So, when you have a really good jumper, to me, you always go for the speed rather than the number of jumps, and that's down in trip.
I cannot tell you how much this is music to my ears. So this week I've taken a bit of a flyer and put up Galopin Des Champs at 8-1 for the Turners. Now, obviously, he's a really short price for the Brown Advisory, and he seems to be heading there. But he strikes me as being an AHOY type horse, a Vautour, don't mention the V word, Vautour kind of horse, and that this race will suit him.
Yeah, look, it's not that long ago that Willie swapped Black Hercules back to Turner's. It was a JLT at the time. But Willie will be learning about his horses as he goes along too. And they mightn't be just pigeonholed the way a lot of other people seem to pigeonhole horses. He's there and he's there. Willie learns about them every time they run. And, he'll be looking at Galopin Des Champs jumping, and he'll be considering and weighing up what's the best race that suits that horse's attributes. For Black Hercules, it was simply the fact that he was too keen. He brought him down in trip. But maybe for a horse like Galopin Des Champs, who has 1/2.5, it's his jumping. And that's his strongest point. You'll use that where it can be maximised.
We'll talk more about Willie Mullins's propensity to live thinking, really, so that the season develops, he's learning like we are, and that means that he can change his mind. And changing your mind is often seen as a weakness. I think it's a strength. With more evidence, if the evidence is different, leads you to a different conclusion, change your mind.
Exactly. I mean, every day is supposed to be a learning day, so why not follow that advice?
So let's talk about L'Homme-Pressé, Ruby, because we haven't had a chance to catch up with his New Year's Day performance at Cheltenham, where he beat the mare, the Glancing Queen. Now, you and I were really enthusiastic about what he did against more experienced rivals at Ascot, where the race to the eye might have fallen apart. Nonetheless, we thought it was strong form, and I was so glad to see him back it up at Cheltenham.
Yeah, look, and so was I. And it's hard to know which was the better race, Ascot or the Dipper, but time will tell us. And look, we compared Bob Olinger to Capodanno and West Cork Wildway. And if you watch L'Homme Presse to Fantasticus in the black and white colours just behind them, over the first 3 fences here in Cheltenham, you'll see the difference. Watch how L'Homme Presse makes ground compared to Fantasticus in the air at each of the 3 fences and forces Fantasticus to come and catch up with him. Now at the 5th fence, L'Homme Presse wasn't so good, but he does move his feet to get himself out of a bit of trouble. At the 6th fence, he goes to his left, and the same again at the 7th. He goes left, but he does show plenty of scope. He gets to the ditch, which is the 10th fence. He's brave, but his hind end stalls and almost twists in the air to make himself make the jump. He gets to the 4th last, which is the first downhill fence on the way home. It gets in tight, but that's a good sign because it can be a trappy enough fence. 3 out, he's neat and almost too high actually at the 3rd last. And then when the Dancing Queen comes at him, the 2 out, they're both long and brave at 2 out. But to the last, L'Homme Presse makes that jump, and the Dancing Queen is just running out of puff and barely gets there, and he gallops away to win well. It was a good performance. I think possibly maybe being more familiar with the horses he beat in Ascot, it looks like a better performance, but he definitely backed it up.
Yeah, I think it's at least as good, if not a bit better. And I was delighted to see him take to Cheltenham so well. He jumped out to his left at Ascot, hadn't he? And over hurdles before. So clearly he was suited by the track. And, you know, hopefully Venetia Williams will be heading towards the Turners. How do you see him faring against the likes of Bob Olinger and potentially Galopin Deschamps?
Well, he's going in the right direction, and he's got that very good habit, which is called winning.
And he's clever as well, as you said, at his fences. I was glad to see him adjust to Cheltenham, because not all horses do.
No, he does. And I suppose when you're adjusting left or right at Cheltenham and it's undulating and you do brush, and you often land on one leg hits the ground before the other, being downhill or uphill, that's why horses can fall over. It's just not level everywhere.
And just briefly before we move on, the Glancing Queen, I mean, she really gave it a go from 2 out, but, you know, and I was over jumping at the last, if anything, in her effort to try and get to L'Homme Presse. A novice, Colreevy won the mare's chase at Cheltenham last season. Do you think she could be a player?
She could, and I suppose it's one of those situations whereby the gelding will have run before you have to consider backing the filly. So you can watch L'Homme Presse at the festival and then factor that into the Dancing Queen. Form is ever evolving at the Cheltenham Festival.
It is. We're talking about evolution of thought here, aren't we? It's a bit of a theme for the show. Yes, I don't think she has much to improve on what is currently showing in that division, but you know, she might need to improve on the day. I mean, certainly Mount Ida is very, very good at the moment. Maybe we'll talk about her later in the series. I'm sure we will. Right, let's move on to Jungle Boogie. This horse also ran on New Year's Day, Willie, and we don't see him very often, but he's managed to maintain his unbeaten record.
Yeah, look, he's a very fragile horse, and you know, a hard enough horse to train. We were joking before we started recording where would he run at in Cheltenham, and I jokingly said the first race he can because it's one day closer. But he is a very good racehorse, but he's fragile. Look, Sean O'Keefe rode him. He went to the first fence, did jump a fraction to his left if you were being a little bit critical, and he was the same at the second, where Manila Escape and the Navy and Green makes a terrible mistake, and Rachel Blackmore does well to stay on. He brushed through the top of the 3rd, but you know, on he goes. Grand Paradis makes a mistake at the 5th, whereas Jungle Boogie was quite good. He was fine at the 8th, but not spectacular or too high. But at the 9th, you can see his technique of jumping. He rises in front, doesn't get that high behind or Archie's back, but he gets plenty high in front to get himself over the jump. Again, he was left at the 13th, and going to the second last, you're thinking, whoa, Grand Paradis or Jungle Boogie, but away to the last, Jungle Boogie just pulls right away to beat the old core who runs on, and Grand Paradis finishes 3rd. It was a good performance. It's a beginner's chase. He has to step up on it, but more importantly, he has to stay in one piece. Yeah,
3rd career start at the age of 8. Won a bumper and a novice hurdle 94 days apart last season, but that's the only time he's made it to the racecourse. Does seem to be better for a fence, though, you know, in terms of his hastiness.
Exactly, but I'd say he is like, he's so little racing done, so little experience, but look, he's a huge engine if we can keep the wheels on.
Right, we're talking about Willie Mullins' evolving thought, and he'll be thinking a lot about his novice chasers. Let's have a look at those that he's got entered at the Dublin Racing Festival. So we've got the 2 novice races there, the Irish Arkle and the Ladbrokes Novice Chase, the latter obviously over further. But we've also added in there the Dublin Chase entries and only included the novices. And you'll see that those 5 horses who are entered in the Irish Arkle are also entered in the Dublin Chase. And there's, I suppose it's not quite a butterfly effect, but all things are connected. So it kind of depends, doesn't it, on Chacun Pessoir? How is Chacun Pessoir? Because he would have the Dublin Chase as his target.
He would obviously look with Enric Gamine gone to Ascot, or having gone to Ascot. Chacun Pessoir will go to Dublin Racing Festival, and he's fine and he's on target. But he met a last minute hiccup at Christmas, and Willie's covering the bases. And I mean, could I see him running novices against Chacun Pessoir? Probably not. But were Chacun Pessoir something that happened to him before declaration time, you simply can't make the entry then. You have to make the entry now. So, but Chacun is bang on course for the Dublin Racing Festival. So I would expect Willie to divide the novices up in the novice races.
Okay, so Chacun Pessoir for the Dublin Chase at this moment, which means that Enric Gamine all clear to go to Ascot this weekend, and we'll talk about that later in the show. FERNY Hollow, he would clearly seem to be the number 1 for the Irish Arkle, and we're arguing that Galopin des Champs will be heading for the Ladbrokes Novices Chase and could go to the Turners beyond that. Right, let's have a look at where the other horses rank below them. We're trying to work out where all of these various horses will go. So COULEURS, Saint Sam, Blue Lord, the latter of 2 of which we will talk about in a moment. Are they all 2-milers?
Looking at them and their style of running, COULEURS was very prominent behind Mount Leinster at the Dublin race and at the Christmas meeting, and got to the front very early. So he's a forward-going juvenile. Saint Sam made all to win at Fairyhouse. So he looks forward-going, really slick jumper. 2 miles may well suit him. Blue Lord, he won over 2 miles in Naas, but they jumped some total of 6 fences, I think. But he did look like he settled well. He was a bit keen as a novice hurdler, but seemed to settle much better over fences. He could have the option of both 2 and 2.5, whereas the others do look like 2-milers, especially Fernie Hollow. You couldn't see him going any further.
Okay, so then we're playing with the idea of Galopin des Champs in the Turners, Jungle Boogie in that division as well. So Brown Advisory looks like it could be in flux. CAPODANNO, STATTLER, could they move into pole position?
Yeah, CAPODANNO most certainly looked like he wanted to go up in trip last week after Punchestown, and he's obviously, as you said, his best run over hurdles was at 3 miles. STATTLER didn't look slow when he won at Fairyhouse. He obviously ran in the Albert Bartlett last year, but he did look like 3 miles or 2.5 would be the options for him. Now, he has to run the 3 mile chase if he's going to qualify for the National Hunt Chase. I'd say that's an outside shot for him. He doesn't really have the profile, and he had no trouble winning at a shorter distance at Fairyhouse. So, he probably looks like a Brown Advisory horse, but his next run will tell Willie a lot more, and he might sort of make a decision after that in his own mind anyway.
And then we've got On the Ropes and On Beton potentially for the National Hunt Chase.
On the Ropes is probably the only one with the real profile for the race. And Run Wild, Fred even sets a fair standard there. But On the Ropes has the runs, the experience that's required to win that race. Whereas On Beton, one run up over fences, one at Punchestown on New Year's Eve. Does he have the experience for it? I'm not sure. And he'll have to step up on form anyway to compete at the Cheltenham Festival.
So maybe you've already touched upon the essence of St Sam and Blue Lord, but let's have a look at them in a little bit more detail. What did you make of St Sam's debut in that Fairyhouse Beginners Chase?
Yeah, look, it was a competitive enough race. You had the Devil's Coachman, Zafanian and El Barra. They jumped out, rocked down to the first fence. St Sam pinged it, and Ford and pulled clear straight away on landing at the back of it. Now, the Devil's Coachman's jumping wasn't up to scratch. He made a mistake at the second, whereas the third fence, St Sam flies it. Again at the fifth fence, St Sam and El Barra both make ground in the air. 7th fence, St Sam comes out of Paul Townend's hands. He's good and brave and forward going. At the 8th fence, St Sam makes a mistake. So does Zafanian just behind him. But he's low and quick at number 10, St Sam. But watch him to 2 out then. His ears are pricked. He's loving jumping fences. Bowls down, gets in tight, but he's quite good. And he flies the last to win easily from the Devil's Coachman, who didn't jump. So you'd one horse who jumped really well and one horse that didn't jump that well. So the Devil's Coachman can probably be, I'd say he's a better horse than he ran there.
Yeah, he missed an engagement, didn't he, over Christmas with the temperature? But I really like the nimbleness of St. Sam's jumping. How about Blue Lord? You mentioned it earlier. Bit of a daft race this. 3 runners, 4 of the 10 fences omitted.
Yeah, last 2 fences were out. Only the 3 runners, Lifetime Ambition, booked out to rock on, to gallop away, but Dancing on My Own. They all jumped the first fence well. The third ground, same. No one makes or loses ground, which was the ditch. Then we're head on at the 4th and 5th fences on the camera, so you can't really tell what's happening other than they all take off and land. But at the 6th fence, which is side on, again, Blue Lord doesn't make any ground. The Lifetime Ambition, Dancing on My Own, makes a mistake. Paul Townend switches him out, or switches him outside the 2 lads between the 2 fences that are bypassed, and he pulls away and wins in an absolute hack canter. But as regards what did we learn, I'm afraid everyone else learned as much as me.
not much at all. Apart from Blue Lord seems to have settled better perhaps than he did.
Yeah, definitely. Had been a bit keen as a novice hurdler, but settled well as a novice chaser.
So if we have a look at the Arkle betting, obviously Ferny Hollow is towering over that at 11 to head. Edward Stern, a British trained novice chaser, in at 9 to 2. And if we look further down, we can see at 16 to 1, Brave Sheshka. Now, he won at Warwick on Saturday, Ruby, beat Sky Pirate. He was receiving lumps of weight against that, the seasoned handicapper. What did you make of this performance?
Yeah, and he did it well. Look, he gets a favourable position when he jumps out. He's in front, and right behind him is Sky Pirate. You know, jumped the 3rd fence. They seem to be going an even enough gallop. They're not going to break the track record, but they're not crawling either. To the 5th fence, they're pretty much going the same speed, and Brave Sheshka is jumping well. They slow the climb the hill, then they quicken on the descent, and they're quickening then to the 5 fences across the bottom. Quickens again off the home turn and went to second last, where he's really good at it, and then jumps the last, going a bit slower, but he just has Sky Pirate well beaten. It was a decent performance. He was getting £20. Sky Pirate's rating is high enough probably to win an Arkle, but he never ran in one. So I don't know. You're comparing handicap form to graded form.
Well, I mean, Venetia Williams actually talked about a target, which I think might be unprecedented. She mentioned the Grand Annual, and of course she's won that race with Samarkand in 2000. So I'd personally be taking that hint. That means that we're relying on Edwardstone. We, Britain, are relying on Edwardstone. A notable thing about the novice chase entries for the Cheltenham Festival that came out this week was how few British horses there were there, and British entries overall down. I suppose the writing was on the wall for the novice chasers, wasn't it, this time last year?
Yeah, it was. If you don't have the top novice hurdlers, it's hard to have the top novice chasers. One follows the other. But no, I think that's a trend, Lydia, that's been coming for quite a while now. Even the balance of entries, the percentage of Irish to English horses has been declining over the number of years. The difference, sorry, it was 80-20 many years ago, and it's coming closer to parity the whole time.
Yeah, and Richard Forrestal's written about it in the Racing Post. He makes the point that Ireland won all 5 of the novice hurdles. If you include the Triumph as a novice hurdle, I know it's not really a novice. We know that, but anyway, for the sake of argument. And 13 of the 18 places are also Irish trained. So this is something that British Racing has talked about wanting to focus on. They've got a quality jump racing review group to look at what they might be able to do about that. So I suppose it's watch this space, but clearly it is needed. We're going to move on. Dysart, what did you make of this silly race at Leicester? I say silly because, again, like Blue Lord, just the 3 runners and hardly any fences.
Yeah, and a very hard race to get a handle on. Look, you can see them when they start. They're coming down the inside of the fences in the back straight in Leicester. But when they do get around to jump what is their first fence, which is the first one in the home straight, Dysart is very high and very left. He steadies to jump the second, and again at the third he was quite left, but they're going really slow. And you see it jump at the 4th fence. If you look in the bottom corner of the screen, if it's accurate, they're only doing 25 miles an hour, which is ridiculously slow. Then they head off down the back straight. Nothing much happens as they bypass everything bar the water jump and into the straight where they're starting to crank up the speed. And you can see that now they're doing almost 10 miles an hour faster by the time they get back around. 4th last, he's high, but to his left. 3rd last, Barn of the Dawn unseats Brendan Powell. But to the 2nd last, Sail Away actually lands just in front of him. And Dysart has the battle, but he does. Joins him or gets out to his left. Sail Away's on the inside, going to the last, and Dysart does enough to win. When you're winning a sprint, it's hard to be impressive. So again, a bit like Blue Lord, it was hard to tell.
Yeah, Nico de Boinville was arguing that this horse loves jumping, so the lack of fences would have been a disadvantage to him. He had a truncated season last season. He ended up missing Cheltenham and turned up at Aintree. He hasn't actually run that often, so we need more evidence. Evidence is what we're all about. We've got loads of evidence.
I think I'll take Nico's word for that now, because to me, looking at him when they go as high and in the direction as he's going, most horses that love jumping go dead straight and way out through the air. I'll take your word for it, Nico.
I sense a touch of cynicism there.
Yeah.
On brand. Right, let's talk about 3-Under-3-5. We've got loads of evidence about him, haven't we? He's won his last 4, the last 3 of which I think have been Grade 2s, and he was doing the same at Warwick on Saturday. Yeah,
look, very short run up to the first fence, and he's having a good look around. Look at him, his head's up in the air, his ears are pricked, and they're not going that quick. Jumps it well. Down to the second, they're going a bit quicker. He's quite good. He was long and brave at the fourth, and away past the stands, they've definitely started to build this race up. Adrian Heskin built it through every mile. He was a good jump at the fence number 12, going a bit quicker, and again at 13, 14, puts the race to bed with a good jump. Of those 5 fences at Wetherby, or New Warwick even, 3 really good jumps at the first 3, 12, 13 and 14 had this race done and dusted. Got in tight to the 16th, but he shows at the last fence with a bit of height that he has plenty left in the tank, and I think he's only doing enough in front.
Now, Adrian Heskin and Ian Turner, who represents the owners of the McNeil family, were strongly arguing that he should be considered a major player for the Brown advisory. Paul Nicholls wasn't there. We didn't hear from Max McNeil either. What did you think?
Well, if you're Adrian Heskin, you can't ride him in the National Hunt Chase, so I'd be making the same argument too.
But we're talking from our perspective, the quality of the horse.
Quality of the horse. You don't know what's under the tank with 3-Under-3-5. I think he's only just doing enough every day.
I'd like him in the Ultima. Is that mad?
Possibly, yeah. Possibly.
Possibly mad or possibly okay?
Possibly okay.
I'll take that. Let's have a look at the Warwick Classic Chase, shall we? There's a couple of novices that we need to just mention. Jericho Rock, who was second, and Korak Rambler, who was fourth. I've just thought we should highlight this because the two of them ran that race very differently. One of them's the maiden, the runner-up, Jericho Rock. I was quite impressed with how he dealt with the tempo of this race. Yeah,
I'd agree with you. Eclair Surf obviously was on the pace all the way and ended up poaching a good lead and wasn't for catching. And the horses behind really struggled to get into it. It was a good run. But Korak Rambler was your top weight. He ends up finishing fourth. Listening to Lucinda Russell, she has bigger handicaps in aim for him down the line, or that seemed to be the impression I was getting. They don't hold him in the same regard as AHOY Senor. So, you know, it's a good run, Lydia, but again, you're looking at a novice maybe winning one of the bigger handicaps later in the year, Scottish Nationals, Bet36, whatever the race in Sandown is now. Those sort of races.
Yeah, definitely. And Derek Fox reported afterwards that Korak Rambler, who has got an entry in the National Hunt Chase, was just hanging right. He's done that before at Cheltenham, and maybe sort of tight tracks, sharp tracks like the old course, like Warwick, aren't really his bag. But I think Jericho Rock could be interesting for something like that, given that he was able to hold his position so well. Let's have a quick look at the Brown advisory betting. Galopin de Champs, who we're pushing into the Turners, he is the clear favourite at 11-8. Brave Man's Game at 4. Capodanno maybe emerging at 8s, and Fury Road at 10s. And you've just mentioned AHOY Senor at 12s, and then the National Hunt Chase betting sees Run Wild Fled, the favourite at 4s, Stattler at 9-2, Capodanno, who would need to qualify, wouldn't he, at 7-1, and would be unlikely to qualify.
I can't see him. He's only 2-3 mile novice chases in the near future in Ireland, the 10 Up and the Woodlands, and I'd be surprised after his race on Sunday where he'll line up in either of those.
Yeah, Vanier's there at 12s. Gavin Cromwell's indicated he goes straight to the festival. And 3-Under-3-5 is 8-1 in the National Hunt Chase betting with Paddy Power, and 16-1 in the RSA. So that's what Paddy thinks about the argument there. Right, that is the novice chases. We've dwelt quite a long time on those because I thought there was lots of interesting form lines to talk about. But now we're going to move on to analyse this. And we have talked about the race already, but the winner is not a novice.
So this week on Analyse This, we're going to look at Tom Bellamy's ride on Eclair Surf in that classic chase at Warwick. They're lined up at the start, 7 of them line up to go. They're spread across the track as they gallop down to the first fence. Hard to know what's going to make the run, and by the time they get to the second, Eclair Surf and Circo Vallis have come to the fore. And it's not till they get to the fifth and start to climb the hill that the two of those have posted a little bit of a lead. Now, Richie McLaren and Tom Bellamy both steady up the hill in Warwick on the first circuit. And when they get to the top, both let their horses roll. Now, they don't send them, they just let the horses roll on. And they poach a bit of a lead on the field, but Tom Bellamy keeps going, and he even poaches a lead on Circo Vallis. But when he gets to the bend to turn to the 5 fences in Warwick, he drops anchor and goes back to the same speed as the field behind him. He's poached an easy 7-8 lengths running downhill on a competitive field, and he maintains that gallop all the way up past the stands, round the bend. He doesn't slow it down, so he's making the others increase their tempo to come and chase him. Now, he makes a mistake then at the ditch, but a really good jump at the fence before they climb the hill sets him on the front foot again. But again, Tom Bellamy drops the anchor climbing the hill till he gets on top, and he simply lets Eclair Surf wheel down, and again he poaches a lead that nobody can peg back. To me, he pinched sort of 12 lengths, 6 lengths on both occasions, just running downhill, not by sending his horse, just letting him roll. I think he rode the undulations of the track really well. Now, Eclair Surf may well have been the best horse in the race, but Tom Bellamy executed it properly.
Now, AHOY is due to be back this weekend. That is right, Ruby. He is running in Sunday's Horse and Jockey Hotel Chase.
That's the plan anyway, Lydia. He won it last year.
And this is the Kinloch Brae to you and I, is it not?
It is the Kinloch Brae, which was, I do believe, created many years ago as a chase confined to horses trained in Munster to keep the great Tom Draper out with Arkle, Flying Bolt, etc.
Good grief, really? Wow.
Right, so I'm told. Legend has it.
That's an interesting bit of history. Well, okay, we asked the roadies, can anything lay down a challenge to AHOY in the Ryanair chase? And if so, what? Overwhelmingly, the answer, nope, he wins it again, was favoured. And that something else provoked some interesting comments. Asterion Forlange was the first one. Andrew McGarry said, here's a fun and useless fact, given he's so unreliable. But Asterion has run twice at Cheltenham and stayed on his feet. He thinks the Ryanair trip is ideal. And if his problem is losing focus at Cheltenham, then the atmosphere of Cheltenham may keep him sharp. What do you make of Asterion? He's entered in the Stayers Hurdle as well, isn't he? I quite like that.
I just wonder what races will be closing next week that he can be entered in. But yeah, possibly. That said, if you stop the video of last year's novice chase behind Chantry House, he does look the winner turning in, but he finished third.
Phil Wills knows how to write a tearjerker. He says that Envoy Alain roars back from the abyss to pip AHOY on the line. Luke Sharples has got some sage advice for viewers out there. Punters should just sit back and enjoy 5 minutes of jumping perfection. And then here's an interesting one. This is from David Johnson, who's Timeform's flat editor, and he maybe demonstrating why he's straying into alien territory here. He says, if Energumen is beaten on Saturday, what is the chance of a Mullins switcheroo? And they look at the champion chase with AHOY. I notice AHOY has a Dublin chase option as well as the champion chase entry. Not tempting enough to back at current odds, but plausible. David, quite literally, you need to get with the programme, because it was back in April when I put Energumen up for the Ryanair. Do you remember, Ruby, at 14 to 1? And what price can you get him now? 14 to 1 for the Ryanair. So rude.
At least you haven't lost on your investment just yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
Is that non-run or no bet now, though?
But it would be now. Yeah, you could do it at 14 to 1 now, or maybe slightly shorter, non-run or no bet. But yeah, with some firms. But yeah, wow. This conversation also prompted this learned discussion between Kai Garwood and Chris Butler. Kai Garwood was talking about Mr. Fisher's, the quality of his form at Cheltenham. He thinks that he looked like living with AHOY in the Ryanair last year until his jumping fell apart. Chris Butler points out that that's the problem with Mr. Fisher. Mistakes start creeping in and he can't recover at the highest level. And Kai Garwood thinks that James Bowen might be the key of him. James, of course, has only ridden him 3 times and twice over novice hurdlers, but also last time out in the Silvaniaco Conti at the weekend, Ruby, and you had a look at this performance on Saturday.
Yeah, I thought the same with Mr. Fisher in last year's Ryanair. It was mistakes that really put paid to his chance. And on Saturday, Eldorado Allen and Rouge Vish jumped out and went a really good gallop at Kempton. But when the camera switches at the fourth fence, I was surprised how close Mr. Fisher was. His jumping had really held up over the first four fences. Now into seventh fence, Eldorado Allen is back in front, and Mr. Fisher gets in tight, but he's fine where he could have made a mistake in the past. He didn't seem to make a mistake. Now, Defi Desai then at the back of the eighth and the ninth fence, you can see him being squeezed along. So his race was run quite early. But what I noticed down the back straight was how wide James Bowen rode Mr. Fisher. He rode him completely on his own. At the 12th fence, he was quite brave. And at the 13th, he was long and answered the questions, but it was always very wide. Now, James was confident on him. And at the second last, he jumps beside Eldorado Allen, who puts in a really good jump. Quickens going to the last, gets in close and sprints away to win. He definitely jumped better. Maybe that was just being down a grade rather than trying to follow AHOY, but he definitely jumped better than he has in the past.
Yeah, I think it really is to do with the quality of the race that Mr. Fisher is running him in. I think he's just slightly below top class. Let's have a look at the prices for the Ryanair, and these are Paddy Power's 7-4 favourite AHOY, St Calvados 10, Chambly 12s, and they've got Energamen at 14. So I need to correct myself, Ruby. 14-1 anti-post terms Energamen for the Ryanair. 4-1 if you want it non-runner, no bet. So quite the difference there.
Quite the difference is right.
Right, let's move on to the Stayers Hurdle briefly. Sporting John came back to form in the Pertemps at Warwick on Saturday.
Yeah, he did. And look, did what I kind of hoped or thought he would do on his last start at Cheltenham. Pick him up going to the third last. Aidan Coleman is riding him, and he's absolutely running away in this competitive handicap. Goes between horses going to the second last and jumps his way to the front, quickens to the last hurdle and pings it and strides away to win. He's a horse that pretends or teeters on being grade one. He's just not 100% consistent, but he's a horse with a huge engine. And I didn't look at his penalty, but you'd imagine he's going to shoulder top weight where he'd take up his engagement in the Pertemps final.
He is entered in the Paddy Power Stayers Hurdle, for which he is 16-1. Classical Dream, the 11-4 favourite, of course. Champ, who has been confirmed for the Stayers Hurdle, seems to be at least, because he's heading for the Cleve. So you'd think logically he goes to the Stayers beyond that. He is 4-1. Flooring Porter and Time Hill, who go straight to Cheltenham. They're 11-2 and 13-2 respectively. Santini was entered along with Styrian Phalange for the Paddy Power Stayers Hurdle. What did you make of that?
I thought Santini ran better than I thought he would the last time I watched him. And yeah, who knows?
If the Cotswold Chase doesn't go well, may well end up over hurdles potentially. Right, an update on the juveniles. The big news this week happened off the track. Unfortunately, In This World is out for the season. Trainer Dan Skelton said he might even be out until Christmas. Unfortunately, he picked up an injury when he won at Warwick last November, and some complications have emerged since then, so he is out. We did have a bit of evidence that we want to talk about, though, from Kempton on Saturday, Ruby. That was Silver Shade. Milton Bradley's got quite a portfolio of juveniles. Of course, he's primarily got Night Salute, and Silver Shade won.
Yeah, look, Dirham Emirati is the horse in front who was favoured on this occasion. They're not going very quick, quite steadily, and Silver Shade is dropped right in at the back. The grey horse makes a mistake at the first, but is much quicker at the second. Now they're going very slow. Silver Shade is right down the inside at fence hurdle, or fence four, but he's quite slick at it. And again at the third last, Silver Shade makes a mistake, and Dirham Emirati looks like he's in pole position to go and win this race. But as the sprint off the bend, Silver Shade has moved readily up on Dirham Emirati's inside, jumps the second last really well, crosses over Dirham Emirati going to the last and jumps it. But then you have Cuban Cigar, who comes flying home to finish second. It wasn't a truly run race, hard race to figure out, but still, you'd love a horse that can win from last in a slowly run race, and that's what Silver Shade did, and make a couple of mistakes.
Yes, and Milton Bradley was of the view that there'll be some improvement if he's ridden more assertively. He sees him more of a stayer, and Night Salute is the quicker horse. If we have a look at the betting, Phil Dorr is now clear favourite, even more clear with In This World being out. 5-2 favourite. Vauban is 10s, as is Isio, and Night Salute is also at 10-1. So that's the juveniles. We need to move on to the novice hurdlers. Now, I mentioned at the start of the show that it had been a big weekend. The other big performance, the one that really impressed me, Ruby, was that of Dysart Dynamo winning the Moscow Flyer. Now, first of all, just to get a handle on how this race was run, you have set up a three-way split screen comparing him with Hiao and Supreme Jet, who won the next two races over the same course and distance.
Yeah, look, a novice against two maiden hurdlers, but a small field versus bigger fields, and we'll play from the start now. So for visual context, Dysart Dynamo, 2 miles in Punchestown, top of the screen. Bottom left is the first division of a maiden hurdle run over the same distance, Killamode, Gove and HAUT, and on the bottom right is Supreme Jet. Now, I think Dysart Dynamo, or we know from looking at it, went a really good gallop all the way. And when he gets to the first hurdle, he has a considerable advantage in a short space of time, over a second on Supreme Jet, and another bit on the other division, which was the first division, Govan, Killamode, HAUT. Time to get to the third hurdle, that has really increased. The bottom right, Supreme Jet, he's just under 6 seconds behind Dysart Dynamo now, with the first division on the left just over. But by the time they get to the fifth hurdle, you've saw Dysart Dynamo jump it. The other divisions the two divisions of the maiden hurdle are a mile behind, almost 9 seconds, 8.7 thereabouts. HAUT with just over 12 seconds to Supreme Jet as he bypasses it. By the time they race around the bend now and get the two out, watch Dysart Dynamo on the top, because on the bottom Supreme Jet is just jumping the third last hurdle. That's his advantage. It's almost 14 seconds between Dysart Dynamo and Supreme Jet, or a little over, whereas HAUT and Govan, who are starting to race, well, they're just under 11 seconds behind. When they get around into the home straight and down to the last hurdle, Dysart Dynamo is still a long way in front. He's going to jump it now. It'll be 10 and a half seconds before HAUT and Govan get there, a little over 11 before Supreme Jet gets there. Now, Paul Townend in the top of your screen is easing Dysart Dynamo down, and it takes him just over 14 seconds to go from the last to the line. Govan and HAUT, bottom left, they're flat out. It takes them 13.4-ish. On my clock, this is not exact. And Supreme Jet, it takes him 13.35-ish. He was half ridden out. The bottom two on the left were completely ridden out. Dysart Dynamo was eased down. Dysart Dynamo's overall time is really, really strong.
So Dysart Dynamo just hugely quicker than the other two, and quicker at all stages. And he's even being eased down in the closing stages. I thought this was an absolutely incredible performance. You're going to take a closer look at it and see how he did it against his main rivals.
Yeah, that was just purely to show you how quick Dysart Dynamo went, more than anything else. Maidens at this time of the year, but if they wait 3 weeks, they're going to be a novice until next November. So I'm not sure how competitive they really are. But Dysart Dynamo, look, he booked out, as we saw, and went a really good gallop to the first fence. He was very good at the second hurdle even. From the time to get to the third, he's well clear, but he's quite keenish in front. He is forward going. He's a good hold to Paul Townend. And away from the fourth hurdle, you can see he's really cranking Paul along. To the sixth hurdle, like, he's just starting to pull clear. He's going further away from his rivals. He's tight but fine at the seventh, and they're coming along at intervals behind him. Down to the last hurdle, he jumps it well and he wins in a common canter. Now, look, Gringo Dobrel had run in the Challow. Challow can be a tough enough race. I'm not sure, just literally taking that on form, how strong it is. It's more the visual impression that Dysart Dynamo created.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Maybe Gringo Dobrel wasn't quite at his best. He'll be interesting maybe for some handicaps going forward. Guiley Billy ended up with an injury, didn't he?
Yeah.
And Hawaii Game, too keen, resented being held up?
I'd say the mistake at the second. Mark Walsh never felt he was happy after that. So I think you can draw a line through that as well. But he eventually pulled up. But look, you couldn't be but impressed by Dysart Dynamo. And look, the Supreme looks like being a supreme contest.
It really does. I mean, I was anticipating some disruption to this market with Constitution Hill, the favourite, ahead of John Bond going into this. I wondered whether Sir Gerhard might cause it at the Dublin Racing Festival, but Dysart Dynamo didn't want to wait around for him or anyone else. Going into Punchestown, Dysart Dynamo was anti-post favourite for the Ballymore. Now that is Sir Gerhard with Dysart Dynamo second in. And Dysart Dynamo is 7-2 joint second favourite for the Supreme. I just thought this was a classic Supreme performance for me. I just thought it was you can go forward. I can just kind of see in my mind's eye past horses that Willie Mullins has trained. Maybe you've been on them that have been able to go to the fore and just gallop away and attack the Supreme from the front. What do you see him as, a Supreme or a Ballymore horse?
He has won a 2.5 furlong bumper at Clonmel. Yeah, he's a very good horse, powerful galloper, good jumper. I would say Aidan Coleman, thinking about John Bon, who runs this weekend, he's been wanting to get a lead on him. I'd say he's thinking happy days, Dysart Dynamo, I'll track him. Constitution Hill looks a good stayer. I'd say Nico de Bonville is thinking perfect. There's going to be a really good gallop and one you can follow that's fancied. And Sir Gerhard looks very quick and he'll be running at the Dublin Racing Festival. I think there'll be plenty of change in that market in the coming weeks. I think when John Bon runs this weekend, Sir Gerhard in a fortnight's time. Where do I see Dysart Dynamo? He is plenty headstrong and it's very easy to argue that's where he should be going. It'll just be interesting to see what Willie does, and he definitely won't be thinking about anything until Sir Gerhard is running the Dublin Racing Festival.
Okay, and thinking about precedents, Vautour, Duvan, Min all won the Moscow Flyer before heading to the Supreme, but Michael Dagenet went to the Ballymore from there. He
did. He'd won over further previously as well. I think the only horse that I can think of that had only won at 2 miles was 5 for 3. I think he'd won a 2 mile maiden hurdle. I know York Hill won the Tolworth before going up to the Ballymore, but I think he'd won a 2 miles 6 furlong maiden hurdle, or 2.5 mile maiden hurdle anyway, prior to that. So it'll be interesting.
There's certainly some strong opinions about Dysart Dynamo out there in the Twitter sphere. Patrick Smith says, Supreme, simple, he wins it. And you think, yeah, that's a compelling argument. And then Graham Crowley comes along and says, Ballymore, home and hosed. So
he is a pretty strong stayer. There's no doubt about that. But look, you have to stay to win a Supreme too, as Champagne Fever should.
7-2 joint second favourite with John Bon, who runs in the Rossington Main at Haydock this Saturday. He should win that on everything that we know about the ratings, but he's going to need to be impressive, I think.
Yeah, I think he will be too. I just think there's some really impressive novices, but as always, they're novices. It'll be next year before we know just how good they are. But there's a couple of really exciting ones.
What's your feeling about Sir Gerhard? Because at the start of the season, before he jumped a hurdle in public, Willie Mullins was talking about Ballymore. Then he saw him over Christmas and he started talking about the Supreme. What's your personal take?
I think we're still learning about him, but I think he's a very fast horse, Sir Gerhard. I think he's a lot of speed. I rode him walk once and he gives you one. He gives you a fair feel now.
Okay. Willie Mullins is clearly long suited in terms of novice hurdlers. So is Nicky Henderson, as we've already mentioned, Constitution Hill, John Bon. But he also produced Walking on Air at Newbury on Wednesday. What did you make of this?
Yeah, it was really impressive. Jumped really well. Was always ridden to the fore. But look, it's no doubt it's the last couple of furlongs that really impress you about Walking on Air. And, when Nico gives him a smack down the shoulder at the back of the second last and he starts to lengthen and he's starting to eat the ground. And even at the back of the last, when he sort of waves his whip at him, you're thinking, like, that horse is going to find a hell of a lot when he's asked for it. He created a really favourable impression and he looks like a strong stayer. I can see, obviously, if you're Nico, you've Constitution Hill, you want to be riding this fella as well and nominate him for the Ballymore, but he looks like he's made for it, yeah.
Well, Nico de Bonville will be delighted that Nicky Henderson was talking Ballymore in the winner's enclosure at Newbury. If you haven't seen it, check out on the racingtv.com website the interview that Nicky Henderson does with Nick Luck. He's in such fine form, and if you're kind of reading stuff into it, you're thinking Shishkin on Saturday. He's feeling good about it. He's talking about the Ballymore for him. Another horse who could potentially be Ballymore bound is Staghorn, who won the Leamington at Warwick on Saturday. What did you make of this performance?
Yeah, 103 rated flat horse, had won at Hereford prior to that. Jumped out. Nick Schofield wasn't hanging around at him. Cheap pieces on him. He winged the first fence, or hurdle even. Cheap, I keep saying fences. He was good and nimble at the second, and he was brave when he asked him when he got to the fifth hurdle. Now, they bunched up behind him when they got back to where they started, and he's quite good at the seventh, very good at the eighth, low and quick at the ninth. And obviously the race kind of slows down a little bit going to the last, but Staghorn, to be fair to him, was accelerating again at the line. So it was a good performance. He's a lot of ability off the flat and he's a real like for jumping.
I was torn because you look at his profile and you think, well, he's got all of that experience on the flat. He's run well in the Queen Alexandra, you know, Albert Bartlett. And then you look at the way he actually jumped. He's actually quite nimble. And I'm thinking that he'll quite like the Ballymore.
He does. He's slick. He's low. He enjoys jumping. Not every flat horse does, but this fella does.
Yeah, he's an interesting recruit, and it's great to see Archie Watson having runners over jumps, as well as having an upwardly mobile career on the flat. Gentleman Arms could be heading towards potentially the Albert Bartlett. Party Business, who fell when just getting into things in the Cello. Could he be just feeling the effects of Newbury as well?
Yeah, like Cello winners have a poor record at the Cheltenham Festival and pretty much for the rest of the season. So it can be hard to get a handle on Cello form.
And Surrey Quest, we should mention him because he looked really quite exciting earlier in the season. He was actually found to be coughing after the race. So that performance that did look to be too bad to be true, hopefully was. So we're coming to the end of the show, Ruby, but we should look ahead to what should be an incredible electric clash in the SBK Clarence House between Shishkin and Energumen. How do you see it?
How do you see it? I'd love to be able to see it, Lydia. Shishkin, Energumen, Shishkin 6 from 6 over fences, Energumen 5 from 5. And what do we know about them? When we know Shishkin can battle, we saw that when he beat Abacadabra in the Supreme. We know he can go to the front as early as he likes. He jumped in front of 3 out in last year's Arkle. He can get in tight. You see that at 2 out in the Arkle, and he can stand out. We saw that at the second last in Aintree, but he does go a fraction to his left, which we saw at the last in Kempton on his last start. Energumen, as I said, 5 from 5 over fences. We know he gets further. Here in Gorham Park, he's 1 over 2.5 miles, so stamina is no distance, no trouble to him. We know he's able to quicken. We see him at the back of the second last in Naas, where he scoots away from Captain Guinness. He does go slightly to his right, though, as we saw at Leopardstown, when he jumps off to his right at the 4th fence. And he's a front runner, but he can win if he's taken on. Notebook took him on in Cork to the 1st fence, and again going to the 5th fence, but Energumen obviously finished miles ahead of him. Like, it's set fair. Shishkin and what he's achieved is entitled to be favourite. I'm just not sure is the disparity in price quite correct.
Yeah, I think everything is up Energumen's street here, whereas I'm not sure that will be the case if they were to clash in the Queen Mother case at Cheltenham. Still, let's find out what happens on Saturday. We've also got San Felicien, the horse that you really like, coming over to Lingfield for the Weatherby's Cheltenham Festival betting guide hurdle over 2 mile 3.5 on Sunday.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. I think he's the profile of a Martin Pipe horse, but were he to win there, he could be something different.
So there's that to look forward to. And also, of course, AHOY at Pearlers on Sunday. There'll be lots to talk about this time next week. In the meantime, if you get lonely, if you've got some time to fill, check out the column, racingtv.com/road to Cheltenham.
If you have an hour and a half.
An hour and a half at a conservative estimate, Ruby. I mean, that's just for the first few paragraphs. Make sure you join us this time next week. For now, goodbye.
The home of jump racing. This is where the magic happens. Feel like a Cheltenham favourite with Paddy Power.